The most fun part about working on a game is the start. That feeling when we are getting to know our idea, when we're working with it for the first time, figuring out what's fun and what's not, and making it the best game it can be. That feeling is exhilarating. But as time moves on, we have less exciting and new things to do, things that we never did before, things that are interesting to us. And we have to resort to working with stuff that we don't necessarily enjoy as much. It could be that, for example, you don't enjoy working with UI, or you don't enjoy working with sound, or you don't enjoy working with art even. Whatever it is, most likely you're pushing it to the very end, the part where you have the least motivation anyway. And that's why the vast majority of games aren't necessarily the 14,000 or more getting released on Steam every year, but rather the unfinished projects on our hard drives just sitting there forever. And I do believe that I have, over years, over trial and error, found the general system that I personally can use in order to publish games to the very end. If you want to see if I'm actually honest about this and actually get something done, I highly suggest that you subscribe to my mailing list, join my Discord, and follow the development of Vuno, the current game I'm working on, a city builder / city management roguelite game. Heavily inspired by other games similar to it, like Against the Storm, but also other games like Micro Civilization and Songs of Six. If you find strategy games or management games interesting, I highly encourage you to get subscribed and follow the development of the games. What is the formula that I claim would help with this? Well, a few different things, because in reality when it comes to finding the motivation, as I said, I do think the number one thing that pushes us back and makes us unable to finish to the very end is the fact that we push the things that we don't enjoy later down the line. So I have a fairly weird observation of something that I'm currently working on, and it has worked for the past 3 weeks or almost a month now, and it's doing the stuff you don't want to do as early as possible. Whenever it becomes relatively realistic or relatively useful to work on them right away. Don't push them. There is an Arabic proverb that actually says, لا تؤجل عمل اليوم إلى الغد, which means do not postpone today's work to tomorrow. And I do believe that this is the number one way that you can use to actually finish your game. Even if you dislike it, it's better to work on it now to get it done with, and work on the stuff that you enjoy or that's best for you later down the line. Now, this is not always the best case scenario. Sometimes the stuff that needs to be done today is the fun stuff. So I'm not saying to push everything that you find enjoyable later down the line. Just whenever something isn't, finish it as quickly as possible. Do not push it. Do your very best to get it done. So when covering the first week of working on my game, I feel like the most important word to describe what I'm doing is setup. Setting up everything so that the workflow later on is the most convenient and, let's say, the most efficient. Trying to target efficiency is important, but the number one priority for me is to make sure that I finish. A lot of people focus on discipline or motivation, and those things are important, but they aren't necessarily the best things or the easiest things to plan on. You can't really control your motivation or discipline in the future. But there is an aspect I feel like I can plan for and I can account for, and I like to call it minimizing friction. In other words, I'm trying to make the task or the effort needed to start working on something the least possible. I'm trying to minimize the effort, minimize friction, minimize anything that would put me off from working. For example, one of the things I do is work on a dedicated laptop. It's just my older laptop that I repurpose, but the main reason is I want to separate my work from my game or my leisure time. Because I feel like working from home, working on whenever I want to, I end up not working. I end up getting distracted by I'll watch one YouTube video, I'll play 5 minutes of a game, and it ends up being a binge for like 2 to 3 or 4 hours, and that would have been the time that I would have dedicated to work. But the moment I open up my work laptop, I've designed it in a way that I just choose not to, because I have the mental image or the mental state of, okay, this is work, this is where I am working, and I'm trying to replicate that office behavior. I don't have another dedicated room that I can go to, because I feel like a lot of people have talked about changing your space. But this is me changing my space. It's having the mental space or digital space changed. And for me, it's been good enough. If you have the capacity, let's say you don't have a different device, but you have a different room you can work in, I think just moving the laptop or moving the computer, putting it in a different room, will help you get in that mental state of, okay, now I am working. I think the worst part about working on the game is having only boring tasks, only tasks you do not like, effectively all bunched up together. It's the only stuff you have to work on. Having variety within your workflow, I think, is the better way of managing things. Having some things you don't enjoy, followed by other things that you absolutely love to work on. And that back and forth between stuff you enjoy, stuff you don't enjoy, I think is what creates the easier or better workflow, a workflow that is easier to keep up with for a longer period of time. Another thing that helps, and is something that honestly I've been using for years within my professional work, but also within my personal projects, and it's using a project management tool. There are many of them out there. I believe that whatever you decide to use is the best case for you. The important thing is that you use one and that you stick to it. It'll help you manage your tasks and plan things ahead of time. If you just go in day by day and deciding on that day what to do, not knowing what needs to be done on your game, you'll often feel overwhelmed, and that overwhelming feeling is one of the reasons that I don't continue my projects, and I think that you might as well not find your projects getting done because of this. So it's important to know what needs to be done. Even if visualizing everything and knowing every single minute task till the very end is almost impossible, it's a good idea to have a general point of view, a bird's eye view, let's say, that isn't as detailed, that isn't as focused, that's just general, I need to do this amount of hours, most probably working on this feature and so on, and then ironing it out later can help. What I like to do is go week by week, so I set a weekly task list, and I try to achieve it, and if I don't, I analyze what exactly went wrong. If I overestimate the amount of time I need for a task, then I need to reconsider how I decide that estimation. And if I underestimate, I also need to do that. Why did I underestimate it? Should I have given it less time? And that will help you be a better planner in the future. Project management or planning your projects is a skill like any other. It's just like working on music, working on programming, working on sound. But I feel like oftentimes developers don't focus on it, don't focus on learning it, don't focus on improving it. And honestly, it's the most important skill when it comes to finishing a project. It's managing said project, knowing what tasks need to be done and when. For instance, one of the terms I've heard thrown a lot whenever somebody's planning on a project estimate time, they tell you to double or triple it. Which honestly, with someone with zero experience with project management, I understand that. But I feel like as you get better at the skill, as you learn the skill better, it can be realistic to only need, say, 50% of a buffer. And it's honestly surprising saying only 50%, because that's a very considerable amount of time. But when your baseline is 200 to 300% more, then honestly only being able to achieve a 50% disparity between the time you plan and the real time is an achievement in its own right. Do not panic about it if you're poor at it, but for the first game, try not to put yourself in a situation where you need to finish it within a certain given time. That need will push you to finish it faster than you expected, but it will be at the cost of your own health, be it mental or physical. So my recommendation is look at this as a marathon and not as a sprint. I feel like this is one of those pieces of advice that's thrown out there in every single video you could watch. But again, the important, or let's say essential information that people need to know is rarely or never information you've never heard of before. It's just the information that's given to you time and time again. If everyone is saying it, there's probably some element of truth in there. So aside from talking about how we work on our project and how we manage it, the first step that we typically do when actually working on our game, the part that we enjoy, would be generating ideas. The first step with coming up with an idea is writing everything out. Some ideas might make a lot of sense in your head when they're just 1 or 2 lines, because your brain is filling in the blanks, trying to come up with very interesting and very fun things to fill in the rest of the game with. But in reality, can you achieve those things? Can you actually implement them? Are they actually fun once it's put out on paper and everything is rigid, as opposed to your brain doing mind tricks trying to make it sound more interesting than it is? So the first step for me comes on pen and paper. You can decide to use a digital note-taking app if that's your preference. I personally like to draw things out, to sketch things out, and to have fun with it. And in that case, I start to write down, okay, what exactly is my game? Break down the mechanics. What will I be doing? One thing I like to do is just to have this general user story or this user arc going from they start by opening the game and then going step by step and seeing, okay, is every single step logical, planned for, and is it fun? There are multiple different assets out there for figuring out all of this stuff. I refer to it as a blueprint at first, and then it eventually grows into a game design document, but a good alternative or a good term you'll find that thrown out a lot is a 1-page design document. And I feel like at the start, even without a game, without a demo or anything, your priority is to create this 1-page design document, to have a general idea, a general breakdown of what will my game have, and to figure out on your own, hey, is this fun? And maybe even show it to other people who are interested, who can analyze just a few words of text and imagine your game. An exercise that I love doing as well is calling my friends on Discord or whatever, and talking to them, and just telling them about the game and discussing with them. And if they're friends who are interested in games, most probably they'll start asking you, okay, what's my objective? What do I do in the game? And if you've missed any of these points, that'll help you a lot in figuring those things out. If you're trying to make a commercial game like I am, I do think that your number one priority is, will people like this? Will people enjoy this? Will people find this interesting? And for that, it's not enough to be in your own head. Then I would recommend market research as being one of your first steps for validating an idea. Now, there are multiple sites you can use, multiple tools you can use. The personal one that I've picked is VG Insights. It helped me in two different ways. First off, validating if this idea is commercially viable. And for me, that means looking at the median potential income, seeing if I make a game that's halfway decent, what is the potential profitability from it? And then trying to analyze the curve as you go higher and higher and seeing how good that is. And also trying to figure out where the minimum is, where it goes from having zero income to starting to have income. And you need to see how achievable or how much competition is in there. Let's say within your genre and theme pick, you find 10 games. That would be perfect. That would be a very small niche. But is the market cap, is the amount of people buying this sort of game big enough to value going into it? Versus finding something where there are millions, sure, but there's 20, 30,000 games. So I have a lot of competition. There's a big pie, sure, but there are a lot of different pieces getting cut out of it. I feel like management and strategy games, I picked them because I enjoy them a lot. I love them a lot. There's a lot of demand and not enough supply, and I do think because they are hard to make. And that is the limitation, that is the barrier of entry. And breaking the barrier of entry is still a challenge in its own right. No matter what you choose, you will face challenges. It's not about trying to find a path that has no challenges. It's about finding the path where you enjoy the challenges, where the challenge presented to you is something you want to work with. And for me to make a difficult to make game is fun, as opposed to struggling to market within a very, very crowded scene. What did I do in my first week? My game was an idle game. It was originally inspired mostly by micro-civilization, and that was the thing I ran the research for, I designed the document for, and everything. But as time moved on, I started to realize that isn't the direction I want to take the game in, and I pivoted a week later. So this pre-production phase is you figuring out your game. So don't be too afraid of experimenting and trying out different things. But once you're done with the pre-production, what are the takeaways? What are the things that you need to have in order to move on to the next step? I would argue is having a design document that you will be improving on in the future, by the way. So it's not set in stone, but rather you will be appending and changing it in the future. Whenever you're watching content like this or people talking about what works and what doesn't, take it all with a grain of salt, because you need to implement this into your own routine, into your own life, and you have your own specific preferences and needs that differ from one person to another. There is no one size fits all. Learn from different people, learn their different experiences, and see what works with you and see what doesn't. The best teacher is trial and error. No matter how many books you read, how many YouTube videos you watch, you will need to try this stuff out. And if you want to learn more about the production aspect of it, next video I'll be talking about what I did past the pre-production phase.